A warning to the Gazan civilians to head south ahead of IDF maneuvers in northern Gaza. The army destroyed key Hamas infrastructure as the IDF continues to ramp up pressure on Hamas with no ceasefire yet in sight. We have more from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
IDF maneuvers are largely focused in Bet Hanun, where soldiers dismantled an explosive site, launchers, and tunnel routes. Aircraft attacked and demolished the site in northern Gaza. Troops from the Givati Brigade eliminated dozens of terrorists at close range and dismantled terror infrastructure. 5 IDF Southern Command divisions are operating in Gaza, part of Operation Gideon's Chariots, launched on May 16th. The IDF operation is a wide-scale campaign targeting the last Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad strongholds in Gaza. Troops uncovered and dismantled a major tunnel network stretching more than 3.5 kilometers. The tunnel network consisted of multiple branches and was used by terrorists as a hideout before it was destroyed. Turning to the issue of aid distribution to Gazan civilians, the U.S. and Israel-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation says that 20 Palestinians were killed this morning in a crush at an aid distribution site in Khan Yunis. The GHF blamed armed agitators linked to Hamas for fomenting the incident. Earlier, the army released this explainer on the aid distribution process.
I'm standing here a few hundred meters away from an aid distribution site that is run by the American company, the GHF. The idea is to give aid directly to the Gazan civilians and bypass Hamas's hands. Hamas, since the beginning of the war, has been doing everything they can to loot aid. They have been doing everything they can to get the aid and sell it at a higher price for Gazan civilians, prevent it from the Gaza civilians, and maintain their terror machine, their war machine, while doing so.
The Army claimed that with each passing day, the process of aid distribution was becoming more routine.
This place is run by an American company that also has private security within the complex, a closed-off area, and the people have been coming more and more, which tells you very simply, they feel safe. I believe this is an endeavor that will have even more points and more spots for Gaza civilians, making it more comfortable and more effective.
President Trump is set to host Qatar's prime minister for dinner tonight. This comes after secret meetings were held between Israel, Qatar, and the United States last week at the White House. All of these efforts are to put one thing in motion, a ceasefire hostage deal that terror group Hamas still has not accepted. ILTV's Shosh Bedrosian has the latest. Shosh?
Emily, for the last 10 days, Israel has been in Doha, Qatar, working to negotiate a deal with Hamas terrorists to bring a ceasefire and a hostage deal into fruition. Israel has said for the last few days they are showing willingness and seriousness in reaching a deal, and in order to fast-track this possibility of getting something tangible, getting the deal solidified, Emily, Trump is hosting the Prime Minister of Qatar today. The fascinating role Qatar plays in the Middle East, a country that also funds Hamas, but has brokered successful pauses in fighting in Gaza, and the release of some hostages is now being called on again by President Donald Trump for help, according to Axios. Trump will host the Prime Minister of Qatar Wednesday evening as they both try to broker a deal for a ceasefire and hostage deal inside of Gaza. Although optimism has been expressed from both Trump and Netanyahu that a deal could be reached, quote, within a week, a phrase that has been used over and over again, negotiations in Doha have been at a standstill, despite Israel saying they are showing more flexibility. Sources involved in the talks say there has been significant progress, but no breakthroughs, according to ILTV's partner Ynet. They also report Israel's security cabinet met on Tuesday evening to review developments in the ongoing negotiations, which have shown progress in the new updated maps of the IDF withdrawal in Gaza. Emily, Trump is also expected to meet with the King and the Crown Prince of Bahrain at some point today.
All right, thank you, Shosh. Now, despite the Syrian government declaring a ceasefire in the Suwaida area yesterday, the deadly clashes there have only continued while Israel enforces its red lines in Lebanon against Hezbollah and in Syria to protect the local Druze coming under attack. Military correspondent David Matlin has the report.
Israel's airstrikes have intensified in the last day in Syria, now directly going after Syrian government security forces. But along with that, the rhetoric from Damascus has also shifted, condemning Israel for these violations, all taking place in an area where the bloody sectarian clashes with the Druze are ongoing.
Israel carried out a heavy bombing campaign against Syrian government forces as they were rolling into the Druze-majority Soweto, and what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Israel Katz have continued to defend as a direct effort to protect the Druze in Syria, based on our Druze citizens in Israel.
אנחנו פועלים גם בסוריה היום, מהבוקר. יש לנו מחויבות לשמור על אזור דרום מערב סוריה כשטח מפורז בגבול ישראל. אנחנו לא נרשה לחזור למצב שמקיימים לנו שם לבנון שנייה. ואנחנו גם מחויבים לשמור על התושבים הדרוזים. אנחנו עושים זאת באמצעות פעולות עצימות.
The IDF confirmed it struck several armored vehicles, including tanks, personnel carriers, multiple rocket launchers, as well as access routes to disrupt their arrival in the area. But reports also indicate more regime reinforcements have been streaming steadily southwards. The fighting that erupted Sunday in southern Syria has left at least 203 people dead at the time of this reporting, according to the latest information from the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, including 92 members of the Druze community, and some killed in what were termed summary executions by government forces. Israel had warned interim Syrian President al-Shara not to harm the Druze population in advance of its strikes on regime targets. Responding to the attacks against their Syrian family, dozens of Israeli Druze civilians on Tuesday crossed the border into Syria in the Golan Heights, but were detained by the IDF. While in northern Israel, hundreds of Druze Israelis staged protests in several locations, demanding the government do more to intervene. But Syria wasn't the only place to see Israel enforce its red lines yesterday, as Israeli jets struck deep in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley, aimed at stopping Hezbollah from regrouping and rebuilding there, according to Israeli authorities. Lebanese state media reported 12 killed, described as members of Hezbollah and unnamed Syrian nationals. Defense Minister Katz called the strikes a clear message to Hezbollah and also to the Lebanese government responsible for reining them in. While IDF activity in Lebanon is common, strikes in Syria marked a rare direct attack on forces loyal to the new Syrian regime.
But as the violence and the rhetoric only ramps up today in southern Syria, in Jerusalem, the government's left wondering just how credible of a peace partner really sits in Damascus.
All right, thank you for that report, David. Well, joining us now to discuss more about the situation in Syria with the Druze community is Israeli Druze journalist Lorena Katib. Lorena, thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure to have you on. Can you give us an update about what's happening on the ground in Soweto now? Have you spoken to any of the community members there about what's happening?
For sure. Emily, a brutal and horrifying massacre is unfolding as we speak now in Syria and Soweto. Innocent civilians, including women, children, and religious figures, are being murdered. There are reports of ethnic genocide, public abuse of spiritual leaders, and systematic targeting of Druze communities in Soweto, while the world, remains silent. In just a few days, the number of people killed has gone up quickly, and at the same time, Al-Julani's regime, the terrorist in a suit, is sending more and more forces to the area, making the attacks even worse. And we, as Israelis, we as the Druze, we ask the Israeli government to take clear and strong action without delay. As Druze and as Israelis, we cannot stay silent. We are their voices, and I'm receiving dozens of messages from Syrian citizens begging for help. The photos and the videos coming from the ground are heartbreaking. We cannot stay silent. The world must act now to stop this massacre.
Now, what is the next step? We've seen Israeli strikes. We've seen strong statements from the Israeli government. But how far will Israel go to protect the Druze community there? And do they want Israeli assistance with this?
Sure, Israel and the Air Force are attacking and, proving assistance, but it's not enough. This is a moment of a deep and painful test for the historic and moral bond between the state of Israel and between the Druze community. You know, the Druze in Israel have stood by the Israeli country to fight and to defend the country for decades, and especially in the past 2 years, sacrificing lives and upholding shared values and protection for the homeland. Now, as our brothers and sisters are being slaughtered across the border, we call the Israeli government to act as it bruised, and we cannot remain silent. We are their voice, as I mentioned before, and just as we stand on the front lines for Israel, we expect Israel to stand up for us also.
Very good point. We have seen such incredible courage throughout, in the aftermath of October 7th from the Druze community in fighting against Hamas and all of these terrorist organizations that impact both of our peoples on the Israeli side or the Druze community in Syria as well. Thank you so much for joining us, Lorena.
Thank you for having me.
When Israel is under fire, the world watches. But we act. Since 1901, Jewish National Fund USA has stood with our homeland. From the moment missiles rained down, we were there, caring for children of essential workers, turning shelters into sanctuaries, providing fire trucks and more. Israel is our family, and you always show up for family. To support the people of Israel for today and tomorrow, turn to the trusted name in philanthropy, Jewish National Fund USA.
Well, a shakeup at the United Nations as all 3 members of a controversial commission investigating Israel announced their resignation. The UN Commission of Inquiry on Israel has faced years of accusations of anti-Israel bias. Its chair, Navi Pillai, along with commissioners Milun Kotari and Chris Sidoti, claimed they were stepping down due to age, health, and unsuitable workload. But the timing, coming just days after the U.S. imposed sanctions on a key UN official, seems to indicate otherwise. The U.S. sanctions targeted UN Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese, accusing her of repeatedly promoting anti-Semitic rhetoric and legitimizing terrorism. But Albanese doubled down this week at a conference of the Hague Group, a coalition of 30 states led by Colombia and South Africa. In her remarks, she repeated claims of genocide against Israel and called for global sanctions against the Jewish state. Israeli and U.S. officials denounced the event as a political show targeting Israel while ignoring the actions of terror groups like Hamas. Well, joining us now to discuss the situation in the UN is Executive Director of UN Watch, Hillel Neuer. Hillel, thank you for joining us. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. What's the significance of these resignations of the Commission of Inquiry, and what will become of the commission now?
Well, look, it's unprecedented. This has never happened in the history of the United Nations, that an entire Commission of Inquiry has resigned. As you indicated, the timing says everything. This was announced just days after the United States imposed historic sanctions against Hamas terrorism supporter Francesca Albanese, someone who's been condemned by France, Germany, Canada, and many other countries for anti-Semitism and Holocaust inversion. The Secretary of State Rubio from the United States imposed historic, bold, and vital sanctions, which sends a message that if the United Nations decides to abuse and undermine their own founding principles of human rights and international law by naming overt supporters of terrorism, notorious anti-Semites like Francesca Albanese, the United States will be the adult in the room and will say no. And, Guterres had many occasions to speak out on this issue. He was approached by the United States. They've sent him letters. And for over 3 years, he's been silent. And so for the UN to say, well, you should have used UN mechanisms, no, the United States went to the UN. The United States opposed her reappointment. They ignored everything. This is the results. You mess around, you find out.
Well, now you've done amazing work really exposing the corruption of Francesca Albanese, who, as you mentioned, was just sanctioned by the U.S. Yet this Hague Group, the event that took place with 30 countries, is continuing, as well as the anti-Israel bias in the international community. What else can or should be done in order to stop the activities of Francesca Albanese, who is so clearly biased against the state of Israel?
Well, let's just clarify, of course, the Hague Group has nothing to do with The Hague itself. I've been to The Hague and I've met with members of parliament who think Francesca Albanese is a horrible person. And thanks to UN Watch, the Dutch parliament in The Hague disinvited her from speaking in the Dutch parliament. So this is a group of radical anti-Western states. You mentioned some of them. Colombia today is radical left extremist anti-American. South Africa basically seems to be on the Qatari or the Iranian payroll. You have the Cuban communist regime and other countries that are either anti-Western or anti-Israel. So there's no way to stop those regimes from embracing a terrorism supporter, an enemy of America. She hates America. She says America was founded upon genocide. She's trying to sanction major American companies, whether it's Google, Amazon, or major investment companies. And, you know, I was at the United Nations just about 2 weeks ago when she called to sanction American companies. It was only a few days later where suddenly Albanese herself became sanctioned by America. She's in a lot of pain because of that. You could see on the videos, she's suffering. Her life may become very difficult for her to carry on trying to attack America and Israel. Her credit cards are probably canceled. She has no access to any of the US banking system. She can no longer visit Harvard, Columbia, Georgetown, Princeton, where she was invited last year. That's over. So, you know, the United States can shut her down. In terms of the UN needs to get the message. The UN needs to get the message, and Guterres needs to wake up. We know that he thinks she's a horrible person. She indicated in a video that I just posted today, as she was interviewed, she said, Guterres has never contacted me, never, and she doesn't expect it. So he thinks she's a horrible person, but due to political pressure, he's the ultimate politician, he's not speaking out. So we need the UN to step up to the plate, and if they can't fire these people, at least condemn them as people who obscenely violate the UN's founding principles.
Absolutely. Well, we'll be following this to see if the UN can step up a little bit, and not holding out a lot of hope for that based on their track record. But nonetheless, great work and continue doing so. Hillel Neuer from UN Watch.
Thank you.
Well, turning to political news, where the future of the Netanyahu coalition is in the balance over the issue of the ultra-Orthodox draft exemptions. Shas party is today expected to announce that it will join the other ultra-Orthodox parties and quit the coalition, leaving Netanyahu with a minority government. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz has the latest.
The continuation of the Netanyahu premiership is not yet in danger, but for the first time in his tenure, the prime minister may be forced to govern without a governing coalition in the Knesset. If Shas joins the two ultra-Orthodox parties, Degel HaTorah and UTJ, who left the coalition yesterday, Netanyahu will have only his Likud party and those from New Hope, led by Gideon Sa'ar. The law on IDF exemptions for ultra-Orthodox religious students has now left the coalition shattered. The head of the Knesset Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee from Likud, Yuli Edelstein, stands in the center of the political crisis and continues to insist that he has red lines for the conscription bill, and they include strict sanctions for those refusing to serve. In the meantime, Prime Minister Netanyahu is pressing for a solution that will reach a deal before the end of the Knesset summer session on July 27th. Netanyahu visited troops of the IDF's new ultra-Orthodox Hashmonaim Brigade in their training base in the Jordan Valley and called for the community to support the effort.
הם באים כחרדים והם יוצאים כחרדים, והדבר הזה אפשרי. הם באים לא בכפייה, הם באים מרצון. והרצון הזה הוא רחב בציבור החרדי. ואנחנו יכולים להוביל תהליך, לא של התרסה, ולא של לוחמה פנימית, אלא של גיוס כל הכוחות בחברה היהודית, כדי להביא באמת לשמירה על מדינותנו ולהגן על עמנו.
Together, if Shas and UTJ are both gone from the Netanyahu coalition, it would be left with only 50 seats in the Knesset, far short of the 61-seat majority. But the parties have not indicated that they intend to topple the government to trigger elections. Instead, the Knesset will likely head into its 3-month summer recess on July 27th with the minority government, giving Netanyahu time to reach an agreement on the draft issue and pull the coalition back together by the fall.
In an unprecedented show of support, U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee today attended Prime Minister Netanyahu's corruption trial underway in Tel Aviv. Knesset Speaker Amir Ohana accompanied Huckabee to the hearing. Before entering the hall, Huckabee stated that this is a highly sensitive matter, which they perceive as a witch hunt and something which distracts from the Prime Minister's obligations to lead the country through a time of war. The U.S. Ambassador's attendance follows statements of support from President Trump on the matter as well. Now, before the Operation Rising Lion, a delegation of dedicated women from the Israel Bonds Women's Division traveled to Israel on a courageous and meaningful mission. In the midst of ongoing conflict, these strong female investors chose to stand with the Israeli people, demonstrating solidarity, resilience, and unwavering support. Guided by the belief that smart investors have no labels, the group witnessed firsthand the strength, innovation, and enduring spirit that define Israel's economy and its people. Let's take a look.
I think it's really important for women to come here, and I knew that if we organized a mission that we would get women to come because they seem to be afraid to maybe go on their own. So we wanted to give them a community to come with and experience Israel post-October 7th.
Before Operation Rising Lions, the Israel Bonds Women's Division led an incredible delegation mission to Israel, where investors visited key locations, got to hear firsthand from real-life female heroes, and got to connect with the Holy Land and its people.
I am so surprised, positively surprised, at how resilient this country is, how everybody isn't staying in the trauma. They are living their lives, they're having weddings, they're moving on, despite and in parallel with everything that's going on in the war.
Throughout the trip, participants strengthened their connection to Israel, supported its future, and reinforced their collective role as influential and informed investors.
So bonds has really got multiple meanings. So this is also about relationship, strong bonds with each other, and fellowship. It's a financial instrument with a great return, and then it's also just bricks that we are laying for the world because we're investing in the place, again, that's our safe house for the world, that's literally leading the way and the way that many of us should follow.
Participants got an inside look at what it means to invest in Israel, seeing firsthand how Israeli resilience powers the effort to rebuild post-October 7th, allowing them crucial insights that can guide future investments.
Now I can see the impact of investing directly in Israel. The last time I was here was 1982, and before that 1974. And I know I'd forgotten what a physically small country it is, and everyone seems to know one another. So by investing in Israel bonds, I do feel like I'm absolutely investing in the country, and the money is going towards the population and those who need it.
While being exposed to the atrocities of October 7th and hearing of the bravery of everyday Israeli women, members of the delegation got to make their own personal connection to the Jewish homeland.
I really hope the women come away with a greater love of Israel, a greater appreciation of Israel. I hope that they were able to see what Israelis are facing, living with, and I want them to go back to their communities and talk about what they saw.
Strength, resilience, and commitment to keep moving forward is the backbone of Israeli society and the backbone of Israel Bonds female investors.
Strength is a common characteristic of humanity, and we exhibit that as strength, and so that's all about being a strong investor. And I love this because we're investing in many areas, not just financially, although that's critical and important.
Amazing work from Israel Bonds. You can scan the QR. It's day 649 of the war in Gaza, and the army issued a warning to the Gazan civilians to head south ahead of IDF maneuvers in northern Gaza. The army destroyed key Hamas infrastructure as the IDF continues to ramp up pressure on Hamas with no ceasefire yet in sight. We have more from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
IDF maneuvers are largely focused in Beit Hanun, where soldiers dismantled an explosive site, launchers, and tunnel routes. Aircraft attacked and demolished the site in northern Gaza. Troops from the Givati Brigade eliminated dozens of terrorists at close range and dismantled terror infrastructure. 5 IDF Southern Command divisions are operating in Gaza, part of Operation Gideon's Chariots, launched on May 16th. The IDF operation is a wide-scale campaign targeting the last Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad strongholds in Gaza. Troops uncovered and dismantled a major tunnel network stretching more than 3.5 kilometers. The tunnel network consisted of multiple branches and was used by terrorists as a hideout before it was destroyed. Turning to the issue of aid distribution to Gazan civilians, the U.S. and Israel-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation says that 20 Palestinians were killed this morning in a crush at an aid distribution site in Khan Yunis. The GHF blamed armed agitators linked to Hamas for fomenting the incident. Earlier, the Army released this explainer on the aid distribution process.
I'm standing here a few hundred meters away from an aid distribution site that is run by the American company, the GHF. The idea is to give aid directly to the Gazan civilians and bypass Hamas's hands. Hamas, since the beginning of the war, has been doing everything they can to loot aid. They have been doing everything they can to get the aid and sell it at a higher price for Gaza civilians, prevent it from the Gaza civilians, and maintain their terror machine, their war machine, while doing so.
The Army claimed that with each passing day, the process of aid distribution was becoming more routine.
This place is run by an American company that also has private security within the complex, a closed-off area.